Good morning. My name is Melinda, and the cat is over there staring at me, and this is a web of stories, and this is my weekly wrap-up. Let's start with the t-shirt. This is one that MJ at Reading This Life, she did as a fundraiser, and I saw Pat at Book Chat with Pat wearing it, and I was like, I need this shirt. So I have this shirt now. It's a little, sometimes when you order shirts, like the sizing is different. This one's, I wish I had sized down. It's a little bit big, but that's okay. I still wear it. I do need to go through my t-shirts because the drawer is full, and I need to kind of pare it down so I can buy more t-shirts. In fact, I recently had to buy a mug instead of a t-shirt because I was like, I can't buy any more t-shirts until I do that. But, you know, I'm happy with mugs too, as you know, and hopefully I will have this mug to show you next week, but it's my squad cup. And the coffee is hot. Anyway, this week, let's see. What can we talk about this week? Well, let's see. There's a Pulitzer Prize, and James won. I actually did, like, I filmed a reaction video, and I'm like, this isn't good. Just don't, my reaction video is boring. Just go watch Greg's, because he does much better Pulitzer reaction videos. But I was like, I'm very happy James won. James was my #1 novel last year, so I'm very happy it won. But I'm probably happier that All Fours didn't end up on it. Not that I've read All Fours, but I have never had a book that keeps getting recommended to me that everyone I know hates as much as All Fours. And the reason why they don't like it are reasons why I know I would not like it. So every time someone else recommends it to me, I'm like, no. Anyway, I'm kind of glad that one is. I know that there are people who like All Fours, and that's fine. I'm just saying that clearly when people talk about All Fours and they say they don't like it and they say why they don't like it, I'm like, that's not going to be a book that I like, because those are the things that would really bother me. And I've never had that that happens so often, for it being such a strong reaction. But then there's this someone who says you should read All Fours. No, I shouldn't. Anyway, I always pay attention. Obviously the fiction. The other ones I always pay attention to are biography and memoir and history. And there was a tie in history, so that's interesting. And the memoir was a graphic memoir, which I think was the first graphic memoir to win a Pulitzer. So that was interesting. Let's see what else happened this week. There's a Pope. Yesterday I was getting stuff ready. I had a whole plan for yesterday, and it's mid-month book bash, so you hear the whole thing on mid-month book bash. But anyway, I was about ready to get my day started, and then my husband comes downstairs, and all of a sudden I get this alert, and I'm like, white smoke, white smoke, white smoke. And my husband's like, you're not even Catholic. Why do you care? And I'm like, well, this is why I care. I have a couple reasons. One, I'm a history geek, and I love things I love things that have lasted through millennia with very little change, which Conclave is one of those things that's happened. Like, it has not changed that different. I mean, they're still doing it by smoke signals. So, has it. So that's exciting. And always, I like that. It's just very interesting, and it's kind of exciting, to see who it's going to be. And this is the third Conclave that I remember watching. I mean, the being there when the smoke came up. I was there for Benedict, which wasn't that interesting, and Francis, which I even knew kind of like at the time that he was special. So we'll see about this one. I had a freak out moment when it was first announced, because I watched the BBC coverage of it. And the BBC coverage was where, like, they say everything in Latin, and I don't speak Latin. I was like trying to like tease it out, and I couldn't. And there were some names I knew that had been thrown around as possibilities. And the BBC was like, oh, it's the first one from the United States. They said that before they said the name. And one of the names that had been thrown about was this guy from the United States who's like super MAGA, like super conservative, super MAGA. And I freaked out. But it wasn't that guy. It was another guy. So that's good. But the other reason why is as a Christian, I'm not Catholic, but we're still Christian, and he's a faith leader. And, the Pope communicates Christianity on a level that very few others can. So it's interesting to hear what they have to say. I do not always agree with what the Pope says. I'm not Catholic again. So there's that. But also on a totally secular level, he's a world leader. And it's important to know who world leaders are, right? And he's a very unique world leader in that, you know, most world leaders are leaders of nations, and he's a leader of an institution. And he's the leader of like the largest institution in the world. So just from a current event standpoint and geopolitical standpoint, it's really important to know who the Pope is, because that does, even though he doesn't govern well, I guess, I don't know, I guess he might govern the Vatican, but the Vatican's not really on the forefront of world policy. But as far as that, it's like, he doesn't govern like that, but his influence is so strong. And so it's important to pay attention to these things. So there was that threw my whole day into arrears. Because then after that, I had to like look at all the memes and learn about him. You know, I don't agree with everything. I mean, there's some things about him that I'm a little about. So, but I think on the whole, and I've heard him speak and things like that, and he has picked fights with J.D. Vance. So how bad of a Catholic do you have to be to get scolded by an American cardinal and told you're wrong? Scolded by an American cardinal. Go to Rome, have the Pope refuse to meet with you because he's dying, throw a hissy fit and force the Pope to come out and meet with you. And then the Pope dies. I'm not saying he killed him. I'm just saying I'm asking the question. And then on top of all that, the next Pope ends up being the first guy who scolded you. Like, how bad of a Catholic do you have to be? Anyway, so there was all that threw my day into kind of fun diversionary stuff. But yeah, I've been getting lots of reading done, and I'm really enjoying all of the books. I cannot wait till I finish some of the books that I'm talking about, that I'm reading right now, so I can talk to you about them. I have 2 buddy reads going, and one of those is a double buddy read. So I'm like buddy reading it with 2 different people at the same time. But that one's a reread. That's Giants of the Earth, and I'm buddy reading it with Hannah at Savage Reads, and then I'm buddy reading it with Christina, who's a commenter. And then I'm also buddy reading Circe with Aaron at Aaron Go Live, which I love. Love that. That's very good. Everything I've heard is true. I'm doing that one on audio, and I'm having trouble putting it down. Although I am sometimes dozing off, so I'll have to like go back. Like each day I have to go back a chapter and start from there, because I can't guarantee that I was actually awake for the entire chapter. Not because the book's boring, but because I doze off. Anyway, that's what's going on with my reading. Yeah, the Pope thing. There's that. Beautiful weather here, although I guess we're gonna get rain again. I'm like, we're having a very mood swingy weather here in spring, which isn't super atypical, but I like it when it just gets sunny and warm and stays that way until September. I don't think we're getting that. Yeah, so that is what's going on here. As for reading this week, I finished 5 books, but one's for the BookTube prize, so I cannot talk about it. All I'll say is I finished it. It was Knife by Salman Rushdie. You want to know what I thought about it? Come back in June. So the 4 that I finished, they had, okay, well, there's 4 of them, and 3 were hits. Let me start with one of the hits. No, actually, let me just start with the bad out of the way. The one that was not a hit for me, and I know this is a really popular book because it has a very high rating on Goodreads. I know people who really enjoy it, and that's great. It just was not a book for me. It hit a lot of pet peeves of mine, and that's A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. And I did this as a buddy read with commenter Katie Sykes. So I started reading this because I had it on my Kindle. I'd had it on my Kindle for years, and I started reading it. I was kind of put on my radar because my husband started watching the TV show, and I came in one day and I'm like, "Oh, you're watching?" He's like, "I'm watching A Discovery of Witches," and I'm like, oh, "I have that book. I need to read that first before I watch it with you." So that's what got it on my radar, and then we did a buddy read. I almost DNF'd it, and I feel really bad DNFing a buddy read, and so I thought, well, let me just switch to audio, which I did. And that was better for me that I switched to audio. But ultimately, this is not a book I would recommend for me. So let's see. It is fantasy, and fantasy is not my preferred. It's not a genre I go to a lot, so there's that. Maybe if I were more of a fantasy reader, it would I know. I still don't think it would. I love witchy books, and I don't really like vampire books, but what I liked in this book was the vampires and not the witches, which was very weird. I did not like the main character of this book. I just thought she was annoying. That was my first issue. She's the super special snowflake that had all these super powers, but she just totally needed everyone to save her. And I was like, no. No. But ultimately, my biggest problem with this book, well, no, I have more than one, was that sometimes the dialogue was just weird and bad. And I noticed this especially on audio, so maybe reading this I wouldn't have noted as bad, but audio, I was like listening to it and going, because some of it was really weird and bad. And I was like, no. So there was that. One of my biggest problems, and this is like a huge issue with me and TV shows. This makes me think that now I don't want to watch the TV adaptation with my husband. And this happens when you're doing with fantasy. It doesn't happen in every fantasy or science fiction show, but it frequently happens in fantasy or science fiction shows. It will turn me off if I see this in a supernatural fantasy sci-fi TV show, is that the person who has powers or something that's super powered in some way, whatever, there's no rhyme or reason to their powers. There's no rule of magic there. It's just whatever it needs to be for the story at whatever moment. And it feels to me when that happens that the writer or writers, because usually it's more than one in a TV show, right, they've written themselves into a corner and they don't know what to do. So they're just going to make sure that this character, in this case, the witch, has a superpower that's going to get them out of it. And it was so annoying. An example that probably, I don't know, this might be a better example to sort of illustrate this. If you have seen the movie Avengers Endgame, in that movie, we have, hopefully I'm not spoiling anything, but here you go. We have Captain Marvel. So Captain Marvel was introduced, her movie came out between Infinity War and Endgame. So she's coming into that movie being like the newest thing, right? And we get her whole backstory in her movie, which, by the way, the movie Captain Marvel is great. But get her in there, and she's the most powerful person, and she's barely in that movie. The only time she's in that movie is when it seems all else is lost, and someone needs to come in and save the day, and then she just shows up and does it. And I'm like, it's just lazy. I would rather you just not have Captain Marvel in the movie at that point. I just wouldn't. But that's what it felt like for this. So it was just very frustrating. So there was that, Discovery of Witches. So that was my 2-star. I won't recommend. I almost kind of gave it a 1-star, which is I wish I had DNF'd, but I did kind of like some of the vampire stuff in it, the sort of lore and going back in history sort of thing. And even the end, not that the end was good, because I don't think it was, but where it hints that the next book goes was a little bit intriguing to me. And I'm like, well, maybe. And I'm like, no, I really didn't enjoy this experience, so why would I do it again? So that was just not for me. But again, I seem to be in the minority on that. You know, just personally speaking, I would not recommend it. Now, the rest of my books were all books I would highly recommend. They were all 4 stars. So my rating system, 1 star is I wish I had DNF. 2 stars, I don't recommend. 3-star is usually I recommend it, but with some caveats, or maybe there's some issues, but I would still recommend it. 4 is highly recommend. And 5 is 5-star. I'd consider it an all-time favorite. So these are all 4 stars. And the first one, I'm glad this one was a 4-star, because my experience with the last book that I read by this author was very frustrating. But this one is Crooked House by Agatha Christie. This almost felt in some ways like she knew Taken at the Flood, ended up face planting at the end. So which isn't even fair. I'm just going to get on Taken on the Flood again. It wasn't even the Taken on the Flood ended badly. It's like that she had that stupid chapter at the end. It didn't even need to be there. Anyway, it's like she wanted to give it another try. Because we have kind of the same setup here. We have a family where the patriarch has died. The patriarch had a trophy wife. The older kids are like not so sure about the trophy wife. They want her to get so what's going on? Who killed? That sort of setup. Now, Taken at the Flood was a Poirot. It was kind of a weird Poirot because Poirot was there, but he didn't actually solve it. He was just sort of there. This one is a standalone, which is interesting. So there's no recurring detective in it. The detective character is a man named Charles, who is romantically involved with a young woman in this family. And and also his father's in law enforcement. And so he's kind of a liaison between like the detectives and the family. And the detectives are kind of using him that way. Probably not super ethical, but yeah, whatever. So I thought that was a really good setup for this book. And he worked really well as that character. This is a book that goes places. I don't want to say much more because I don't want to spoil it. It's kind of a book that I finished it and went, okay then. And then it's like, but I mean that in the best way possible. I guess in the realm of Agatha Christie, I would say forget Taken at the Flood and just read Crooked House. Or don't read the last chapter of Taken at the Flood, but I just think this is a much better book than Taken at the Flood. So there was that. I'm glad that she was able to redeem herself a little bit. I cannot remember what my next one is, but I'll read another one next month. Okay. The next one I read for Historathon Q2, which is 500 to 1500, which is so post-Roman through the medieval period. And I read Embers of the Hands, Hidden Histories of the Viking Age by Eleanor Barraclough. This first came on my radar because it was longlisted for the Women's Prize in Nonfiction this year. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I will order it. Like, no self-control. I've gotten to the point now where I've gotten much better about buying novels, but I am buying some history books. And that is a conscious decision on my part, especially when it comes to U.S. history that we'll get into in Q3 and Q4, because I want to be able to have those books on my shelves because I don't know what's going to happen. So anyway, I did buy this. And this is sort of like an overview of the Viking Age, and it's really tied to different artifacts that they've found, which I thought was a really interesting framing device. This is a great high-level overview of the Viking Age, and I really enjoyed it. She puts in some humor there because when you're there's references to Norse mythology. That stuff is weird. There's always some humor in it. Very, very readable. If you are looking for a deeper dive into a broad view of the Viking Age, which I kind of was, this is not the book for that. I wouldn't say that's a detriment. That's a deficit of this book. I would just say that's not the scope of this book. I do have another book that I'm hoping to get to in Q3, which should go a little deeper into the Viking Age. But this would be like a first, hey, let's learn about Vikings. Here you go, sort of thing. And it does cover everything from the Vikings all over Britain and continental Europe to Iceland to Greenland. And I will say that when she talked about the Vikings in Greenland, that was the most interesting because it was what I knew the least about. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It's not super deep. There you go. Okay. And then, oh yeah, that was 3. Okay. 4th book I finished by surprise. So this book I had actually planned not to read until next year. I was saving it for Classics Catch Up 2026 because I had never read this book, and it's a book I feel like I should have read. And then my daughter came home from school and said she was reading it in her ELA class. And I am not like, I like to read along what they're reading, not because I'm that parent that's going to throw a fit about it. I just want to know what they're reading so I can talk to my kids. And so that book is flying all over my room. That book is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Again, I had never read it. How did I finish it by surprise? Well, let me tell you. This book has 250 pages. What I didn't know is that, let me get here, only 158 of those pages is actually the book. All of this is like essays and criticism about the book. So I'm just reading along, and then I'm like, oh, that kind of sounds like like we're at the end of a part. And I'm like, no, we're at the end of the book. I wasn't planning to finish this book right away, which is fine. It was like, huh. Anyway, my thoughts about this book. Liked this book. This was a great book. I am actually, I don't know if I would say I'm glad I didn't read when I was younger, because I kind of wish I had, so I can kind of compare it to how I felt about it now. Because when I would have read it in high school, we were still in the Cold War. And the threat that we felt as just teenagers came from outside of the country. It was the Soviet Union. It was that's what it was. The idea of book burning and book banning, I mean, it might have happened now and then, but it wasn't a big deal. Like, I mean, I guess it was, but from our viewpoint, I mean, we didn't hear about book bans all the time. That was just not a thing. But now that I read this, the threat is from inside the house. Yes, and book banning is everywhere. So this hit me in a much different place than I think it would have hit me when I would have read it if I had read it in high school. And had I taken, I've told this before, when I got to be a senior in high school, I had a choice of 2 ways I could go in sort of advanced ELA. I could take AP English, in which case I would do the old AP class and then take the AP exam and hope I scored high enough to get college credit. Or I could take college writing, pay $30 and definitely get college credit. And so I love to write, so I chose college writing. Retrospect, I wish I hadn't done that, but that's a whole other story. Had I taken AP English, I would have read this book, because I do know they read it in that class. So that's what I thought about a lot reading this. So my daughter is still reading it in her class, and I'm interested when she finishes it, talking to her about how she did, because she doesn't have that experience that I had as a teenager of feeling safe from your country, but feeling under threat from outside of your country. Whereas now it's like the other way around. So it'll be interesting to hear. I also would wonder if I would even be able to deal with this as a teenager, because this was, I know people who read this. Well, I should say, when I went and logged in my rating and I went to Goodreads, I just wanted to know what other people thought of it. And one of the reviews on there was Olive from a book Olive. And her review was, I can't believe they made me read this in middle school. And I can't either, because I don't know how a middle schooler would be able to process this book. I just don't think they would have the maturity to do it. So, I mean, I would have read it as a senior in high school, which even then is kind of, well, I think a senior in high school could handle it. But yeah, it was definitely considered an AP book. So yeah, I'm very glad I read it. I will definitely be reading it again in the future because, well, first of all, now I know how long it actually is. But yeah, so definitely, I'm really looking forward to hearing what my daughter, will think of it when she finishes it. So, yeah. So, speaking of classics catch up, that's my week, but really quickly, I know it's May and I'm already thinking about starting to make a list of, books for my classic catch-ups, and I think I have 3.5 books on the list, and I need help with the half book. Okay, so I have only ever read one book by Edith Wharton, and that book was Ethan Frome, which I read as a freshman in high school, and I despised it with the heat of 1,000 suns, and have not touched Edith Wharton since. I would like to try Edith Wharton again. I am not going to reread Ethan Frome, but I don't know where I should start. I think right now it's kind of between The House of Mirth and The Age of Innocence. I do have Summer. Did you have a book, Summer? Is that a book of hers? I think I have that on my Kobo. But if you've read Edith Wharton, where would it be other than Ethan Frome? Where would you recommend me go? Okay. Secondly, I'm thinking another author that I have never read that, I think I might add onto that list would be Hemingway. I've never read Hemingway. Where would be a good place to start with Hemingway? I will tell you the books on my list right now are something by Edith Wharton, A Tale of Two Cities, Dracula, and in the category of booktube made me do it, thank you to Pat and Angelia and Greg, The Catcher in the Rye, which I have never read. I was going to read it several years ago as an adult, and someone said, if you haven't read it by the time you're 16, it's too late. So I said, okay, well, it's too late. I'm not going to read it. But I've heard those 3 people talk about this book so much that now I think I should read it. So I have that on the list, but the other 2.5 books I'm still kind of thinking about. So if you can help me with the Edith Wharton, and if you could help me with the Hemingway, and I will figure out the other book at some point. I've got like months to figure it out, but I'm a planner. So anyway, let me know. Okay, that is my week. I have to do some more videos today, so you're going to see this shirt coming up. yeah, and I have to update for mid-month book bash. Anyway, like, subscribe, join my Discord. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.